Hello everyone and welcome to a showcase of the most unique, futuristic, and forgotten laptop I've ever covered on this channel. Here it is, and if I were to show you this laptop, you'd think, hey, maybe that's from like 2015, because it's pretty thin. It looks very nice, very sleek, and very modern. But what if I told you this hails from around 2009 and was Dell's ultra high-end beginning to a series that never got a second entry? This is the Latitude Z, and there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So let's take a bit of a closer look. But first, let's talk about what this was for. So, in short, this was Dell's attempt to convince everyone, hey, we're not the boring business laptop company, we can make something cool. So they just cooked up a ton of new, innovative, completely unseen technology and stuffed it in a ludicrously overpriced laptop. So these weren't really meant to sell units, they were to wow the media outlets, and that is exactly what they're doing like 20 years later. I mean, not 20, but like 16. Anyway, this is an absolutely fascinating piece of hardware that is still kind of unbelievable that it A, exists, and B, any of it even works. So let's take a bit of a closer look. First, starting off with the standard laptop things. On the left side, you have basically nothing. Just wireless on-off switch, big vent for the fans. On the front, there's also literally nothing. And on the left, you have kind of a pittance of ports, which is a button that I still don't know what it does, headphone out, no mic in, USB 2 plus eSATA display port. And then on the back, on these funky little chrome corners, you have gigabit LAN and the charger. And I applaud Dell for not using some stupid, tiny, easily breakable barrel jack. They put the taller ports that wouldn't fit on the slim side, like Ethernet and the charger, on these big chrome pieces at the back, and they are actual metal, which is interesting. But instead of opting for some stupid tiny port that you would need a dongle for, they just found somewhere to put the full-size ports, so I applaud them for that. This obviously isn't the thinnest laptop you could get around 2008. There were thinner ones, like the MacBook Air was actually the world's thinnest for quite a while, but this is definitely one of the best on the PC side. However, it's kind of funny that their attempt at, hey, look how thin we could make a laptop is 17 inches, because, in my opinion, if you've got a laptop the size of a whole desk, it kind of becomes negligible how thin it is. But anyway, let's go ahead and take a look on the inside. I'll move the camera for this so you can see it a bit better, but it's not all that exciting looking on the inside. You have a keyboard that is dwarfed by the massive amount of blank space around it, and it would look even sillier if not for the chrome bezel, which again is actual metal, so that's a nice touch. You have two power buttons, and I'll get to that a bit later. Of course, the Latitude Z branding there. You've got your indicator lights, volume buttons, which I will also get to later, and an absolutely giant touchpad. This is even huge by modern standards. Most older laptops, you look at the touchpad and you're like, wow, that's puny. Like, for example, here's a Latitude E5500, a pretty large laptop. This is 15 inches, and by modern standards, that touchpad looks tiny. It's really small, but this touchpad is massive, absolutely giant by 2009-ish standards, and it's still reasonably sized today. The whole thing, just like the outside, is covered in this very nice kind of dark cherry soft touch rubber, and I think you can see the color a bit better when I hold it up like that. It's a nice color, and I quite like it. The rubber here has not started to go sticky like it has on many older Dell Precision and Alienware models. So this is actually still completely smooth, and as you can see, it kind of attracts scrapes and scratches and makes them very visible, but it's still in great condition, and I don't know how, because this is 15 years old. It's also in between the keyboard keys. The whole top is made of this, even the touchpad, which gives it a bit of a weird feel, but again, I'll get to that a little later. Right now, we'll just use this first power button to turn the machine on, and we'll go ahead and get into our operating system. It clearly has a backlit keyboard, and although that is a feature we can take for granted kind of nowadays, it wasn't really that way in the late 2000s when backlit keyboards were a good deal less prevalent. So this is absolutely a nice touch that nicely complements this laptop. Now, back to the display. Something you may have noticed is the huge bezels. And this was a very expensive machine, so is Dell just cheaping out and putting a tiny display on their 17-inch laptop? Or is it that technology of the time just didn't allow for smaller bezels? Well, that's not quite the case. I mean, this has much smaller bezels, especially up at the top. And this is the Latitude E4200 from about a year earlier, actually. So it's not a technological limitation. Rather, it's a fascinating technological innovation. Because look what you can do with these bezels. That's a shortcut menu right there. But it's not only an app launcher. You can change the volume by dragging your finger up and down, or you can launch the media bar with media shortcuts, but that's of course not all it can do. You saw I had the Unreal Tournament icons on there, and that's definitely not something Dell shipped it with from the factory. So how am I doing that? Well, with the customization application where you can create a custom menu. We'll go back to the Edge Touch Classic menu, and, well, this is pretty basic. You open it, you get Edge Touch configuration settings, which is, by the way, what this is called, launch Internet Explorer, and launch the media bar. But let's look at some other menus. So this is the multimedia menu, where you get the volume adjustment, the play, pause, all of that stuff. The nice thing about this volume control in particular is that you can either slide your finger up and down, and it works quite well, by the way, or you can just tap and set the volume up or down to exactly the level you want, and that's a pretty nice feature. Now, you can see it doesn't perfectly work 100% of the time, but for a capacitive strip under a bezel next to the screen, I'd say this is pretty damn good. And this is a concept that wasn't really re-explored until, I would say, the touch bar on MacBooks many years later. So this is an absolutely fantastic feature. Let's go back to my custom menu. Oh yes, and you can have up to 2 different custom menu configurations where you can add custom applications, that sort of thing, as well as other predefined applications. Like, for example, there's also a brightness adjust, which works in the same way the volume does. But going to About, it's developed by Circuit, this company made it, and yeah, this was never implemented on any other Dell laptop, probably because it cost a ridiculous amount and only 3 people ever knew it existed. So that menu is activated by tapping this barely visible rectangle on the edge of the bezel that you wouldn't even know it was there if you weren't looking for it. It's very nice and subtle, but it does have a tactile difference from the rest of the bezel, so you can actually tell when you're hitting it. Yes, the Unreal Tournament 2004 configuration menu. So a nice thing that this also does is, of course, you can scroll with the multi-touch touchpad, which that wasn't a very common feature on PC laptops in the 2000s. So you have horizontal and vertical scrolling through the two-finger the two-finger gesture that is very common today, but wasn't really a thing in the 2000s. Instead of the typical drag your finger along the very edge of the touchpad. So this is a Synaptics multi-touch touchpad, and it's absolutely huge. Touchpad is one of my favorite features of this machine. It is a wonderfully expansive canvas on which to move your fingers, but if for some reason you're not satisfied with that, well, you can also scroll with Edge Touch. You can kind of pinch the bezel and scroll with your finger, and in the Edge Touch menu settings, you can configure the sensitivity, the scrolling speed, and all of that. So that is another nice feature of Edge Touch. Now this is completely unnecessary, it is absolutely a gimmick, but as I mentioned, this laptop was built to wow the media, not to be practical. And clearly, it is wowing the media. So we'll close this, which I could have set a shortcut to do through Edge Touch, but I didn't think about that. And I'm going to demonstrate the volume buttons. Now that sounds like an incredibly boring sentence, and I bet some people just clicked off the video, but these are actually another crazy feature that I wasn't expecting. There's no real way to actually demonstrate this. However, when you touch the volume buttons, which are touch sensitive rather than just being a key, you get auditory, visual, and haptic feedback. They make a small little buzz, which you can also feel through your finger, and they light up. Let me demonstrate. You can kind of hear the tiny haptic devices working when I press the keys, but it either features a membrane that vibrates or a small motor like you would see in a phone that actually vibrates the chassis underneath the key that I'm pressing. And there's no way to demonstrate that, obviously, through the camera. It's something you have to experience for yourself. But truly, I could spend all day just pressing these buttons. And there are 3 separate ones. There's not just one, because they actually vibrate in noticeably different areas. So it's absolutely fascinating. I don't need to get stuck on this for too long, and I should probably stop pressing these before I spend all day doing it. But that is one of my favorite things about this computer, the silly little vibrations. You know what else has haptic, visual, and auditory feedback? A button. However, that's not cool. You know what is cool? This. These are goddamn awesome, and I love them, and I also like how the mute button lights up, but I would prefer for it to stay lit if your audio is muted. That is really my only complaint here. Everything else about these volume buttons is absolutely fantastic. Swinging the camera back around, let's test out that keyboard. I believe in Dell's advertisements, they said the keyboard, you would wish it was your touchpad, or something like that, which is, I still can't figure out what that means, and I have no idea what they were going for. But let's see if I wish this keyboard was my touchpad. Now, I type pretty loudly and with a good amount of force. I don't know why. I just feel violence when I'm handling a computer, I suppose. But the keys aren't very loud compared to many other laptops, and for such a thin laptop, they actually have a surprising degree of travel. They can feel a little mushy depending on the angle you hit them from, and there's also, well, quite a lot of space between the keys. It's almost a chiclet-style keyboard with just the amount of space between the keys. If you compare that to, say, a normal laptop where there's almost no space between the keys and they really just abut each other, well, it's certainly something to get used to, but once you get used to it, it's not at all bad, and I personally really like the feel of this keyboard. One of the best thin and light laptops I've ever felt in terms of keyboard. It also has a webcam, and it's not as bad of a webcam as one might expect from a 2000s laptop. So, there it is. There's my camera. Cameraception. Room tour. There's my workstation over there. So, yeah, clearly it is not the best, and it tends to like to go in and out of focus quite frequently, but honestly, it's really not that bad of a webcam, except for when it keeps going in and out of focus like this. It just decides, hey, you know what would be cool is if I blurred right now. And I can, well, you can kind of see that. Whenever you move it, it goes in and out of focus. So that is honestly not the best feature. However, when it isn't doing that, it looks pretty good. I'm going to shut down the laptop and actually go to Windows 7, because there's another feature I need to demonstrate to you. And that feature, well, first we need to look at the back. It's a business laptop from the 2000s, yet there's no dock port. And why is that? It was kind of a requirement for every laptop, especially business in the 2000s, that it had a docking port. I mean, hell, even the 12-inch Latitude E4200 still has the capability to dock. So what's up with that? Well, they did make a dock for the Latitude Z, but not really in the conventional sense. Here it is. It looks like a Wi-Fi router or maybe an external hard drive with a weird antenna. And there's a good reason for that. It's very limited in connectivity, and there's also a good reason for that. But just going around the sides, you have the charging port, kind of. It needs a 65 or higher charger, DVI, 2 USB 2 ports, USB-B, and I'll get to that in a second, 2 more USB 2 ports, audio, and that's it. So it's very limited in the portage, I will say, compared to, hell, even the media slice that docks onto the bottom of the Latitude XT2 has more ports than this. It even has an optical drive. So this is pretty lame in terms of docking compared to everything else, until I show you its special ability. Now that USB-B port, yes, that is a way that this dock can connect to a computer, but the way that works is absolutely nothing to write home about. I'll just plug in the dock here, and then you'll notice this is neither a Dell nor a Latitude, nor even a good computer. This is a little HP netbook, aka a crime against God, and if I plug in the dock and just stuff a USB drive in the front, well, let's see. Come on. God damn it. Well, it was working when I tried it earlier, I promise. There we go. There we go. So it showed up when I plugged in the dock, and I can plug in another drive, and that one will also show up, hopefully. I don't want to press my luck. Yes! Yes, there's the other drive. So you can use this as basically a USB 2 hub with literally any computer with a USB-A port. So that's not the special thing about this dock. That's only one of the ways that it can be connected to. The other way specifically requires the Latitude Z, a lot of messing around with drivers, a very unknown protocol, and a wireless card that, well, is very odd, we'll just say. So we'll get into Windows 7, because that is really the only OS that this works correctly on. And here we go. It's Windows 7 time. So, this dock, of course, can connect through USB, but it can also connect wirelessly, and that is the point of this antenna. So you might be thinking, well, you said it connects with a wireless card, so is it Bluetooth? No, it's actually not. Well, is it 2.4 gigahertz? No, it also does not use a Wi-Fi band. This uses a protocol that was supposed to become a thing, just like this laptop, but I've never seen it used anywhere else. And that would be wireless USB. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's USB 2.0 signals over the air. And, well, it's certainly a very interesting technology. So let me just go to Add New Device, and it'll scan nearby airwaves for a wireless dock. And this actually does take a little while. There we go, that's a bit of a closer shot for you. So, when you're scanning for wireless devices and it finds a dock, well, let's see. Oh, okay. Whoops, my bad. So I needed to remove that dock before I can add it again. So every dock actually has basically a MAC address. It's not literally a MAC address in the sense that it would be on the internet, Ethernet or Wi-Fi per se, but each dock has a unique identification code that it can... Come on. Ah, that's the problem. Okay, so as you're seeing, this is a bitch. It doesn't really work right. So we're gonna try that for the third time. So as I was saying, every dock has a unique hardware identifier that you need to know to pair it. So on the bottom of every dock, it lists 2 different MAC addresses that you can use to pair it. Or, while you're scanning for wireless docks, you can plug in the USB cable to the laptop, and that will allow you to sync the dock with the laptop. And then you don't need to use this cable again. You can just unplug it, and why is it not working? Yeah, we're gonna try and reset the dock through this button on the back. So clearly, you're seeing why the wireless dock thing never caught on. This was way ahead of its time and way broken. I may need to actually pair it using the USB cable if this doesn't work for the 4th time. Earlier, I was able to pair it using, let's see. Earlier, I was able to pair it using the pairing method involving the MAC address and the PIN code, but clearly that's not working now. Oh, oh yes, okay, so it paired through the USB cable, so that's one way. We're going to switch it over to manual connect, and then we're going to switch over from using the cable to using the air. So we're going to hit connect on that, and I think we should be connecting to the dock if we're not already connected to it. And by the way, this is not just me being bad at using it. Oh, god damn it. It's not just me being unskilled at utilizing the dock. This is truly the experience of trying to get this damn thing working. I've done it once before. I plugged in a USB drive and put Unreal Tournament on it. It barely worked. It was very slow, but it's still a fascinating technology, and it definitely deserves to be showcased. So we're going to unplug our dock and make sure all the connection things are set up correctly. Then we're going to reset it again and then plug it back in. So the moral of this story is a hardwired connection is always better than some wireless bullshit, whether that be, you know, an untested new protocol called wireless USB that obviously didn't catch on for a reason, or whether that's just Ethernet is faster than Wi-Fi. So let's go back to our wireless connection manager. Here's our dock. We're going to delete it. And okay, so it's connecting to the card just fine. We'll plug it in, reset it. By the way, the USB port on the back is also used to update dock firmware. So we'll try and do that. Yes! There we go! Okay, so now it's coming up. It's asking me for the pin, which is listed on the bottom of the dock. So that's 8144137. So theoretically, if there was more than one of these in range, that's how devices would be differentiated. Automatically connect within range. Yes, and then it shows the signal strength. So through my extreme maturity, as you can obviously see, I've given it a little name. And so that was about 6 minutes of trying to get the damn dock to work, but now that Dell Wireless Dick is functioning, let's fill it with drives. So USB disk, USB disk, USB disk, USB disk, and of course Windows 7 has to initialize all of these drives individually, so it'll take a little while. But we have all 4 drives plugged into this now. And there we go. Okay, so Windows 7 is seeing what I've plugged in here and, you know, realizing what's going on. I just pulled some random drives out of a drawer. And to test this, I'll just take Unreal Tournament and shoot it over to one of these. I believe this is one of the faster USB drives. And let's see. So we can see our speed isn't all that great. It's about 4 megabytes per second. But if we take out some of these drives on the front, it kind of goes up a little. We're up to about 4.5. Now, while that's transferring, I'll show you the other feature this has up its sleeve. I'll move the Latitude here. This is actually the newest laptop I own, by the way. And we're going to plug in a DVI capture box, the one that I use for my streams. Yeah, so it's detecting the other display. It thinks it's 1280 by 800, and it's detecting my capture card. So the way this DVI port works is through a technology called Display Link, which is, I mean, it's still a thing today. It's a USB to DVI adapter, essentially. And I think if I reconfigure my capture card, we should be able to get some video out of this. There we go. That's my Windows desktop from the Latitude Z, mirrored all the way from here. And I've got the Latitude in my hand right now, and it's very slow. The display, it gets very slow when you start to, when you start to do the mirroring. But I'm going to drag this window over, and there it is. There it is. And the dock actually cut out for a minute there when we plugged in the USB cable. The max resolution this remote DVI port can function at is 1280 by 800 from what I can tell, and it doesn't run off the integrated graphics. As I mentioned, it uses DisplayLink, so it's a USB to DVI adapter. It can't do 3D, but it does 2D okay. So I've got the Latitude on my lap here, the Latitude, if you will, and you can kind of see there's a bit of latency in moving the window. The colors are a bit dull, and really it's not that great of an experience if you're trying to like watch a movie on it or something, but if you're just doing a presentation, it's really fine. That gave me an idea. I'm gonna watch Top Gun over remote DVI just to see how that is. Okay, let's try this out. So the dock video is running at 1024 by 768. This is a 480p DVD rip that I'm dragging over here, and I'll put it in full screen. Audio is from the laptop instead of the dock because anything plugged into the dock slows everything else down. So I want to give the video the maximum bandwidth it can. So I've unplugged the USB drives, I've switched audio to the laptop, and I'm going to put it right next to the dock to improve the connection. Here we go. That's not half bad. Wow! I'm impressed. Why is it actually working well? Okay, so I'm going to walk away here. I'm going to take the laptop and I'm... Nice. Okay, so I'm about 4 feet away. The laptop is about 8 feet away. It's on the other side of the room, and the video has completely cut out. And the laptop is here again. And oh, the dock cut out. Oh, it's back. No, it's not. Oh, okay. So, wireless USB is a short-range communication protocol. WPAN, Wireless Personal Area Network. So it doesn't go very far, as you just saw. It can make it about a foot away from the dock stably. Once you start getting 4 feet away or so, your video starts to stutter, your USB drives start to cut out, your audio starts to get a little crusty, and I mean, it's about 10 feet away maximum that the dock will even stay connected. But putting the laptop 8 feet away when I'm not playing a movie, you can see we're only down to 3 out of 5 bars. So dock connectivity definitely is dependent on how much data you're trying to shoot into it. Of course, it's a lot better, a lot more reliable over the USB 2 connection. It's about twice to 3 times as fast when you plug it in physically. It just cut out. Yeah, it's not that reliable, but is it cool? Hell yeah. This is the most awesome thing I've ever played with. So I just showed you a remarkable aspect of this laptop that's been pretty unmatched by anything since. And well, now it's time to do the exact same thing again with another very odd feature of this laptop. You'll notice it has a panel here, and you probably think, okay, So that must be for RAM upgrades. But not quite. That is a wireless charging coil. And you could buy a massive stand for this laptop that actually had the wireless charging coil in the other side as well. And the way the laptop communicates with the dock to tell it that it's properly centered is through this infrared LED. There's a panel on the bottom that is translucent to IR light. And this LED, whenever the laptop is on, is constantly saying, hey, I'm here, to the dock. And whenever the dock senses that, it would start sending power. Now, I didn't buy that accessory because they are expensive, and evidently they don't work very well at all. Evidently, it takes about 6 hours to completely charge the battery versus about 1 hour on the real physical charger. So I didn't even bother with purchasing it because, you know, it sucks. But it's certainly a fascinating thing because that's not even a thing you get on laptops nowadays. What makes this work is on the inside, about right here. I'll show a photo. There's a board that's just full of capacitors and MOSFETs and power delivery circuitry that converts the wireless charging power into something the laptop uses. Also, this is really funny. There's a little literature book on the inside of this door, and it unfolds. It's so cute. So let me read some of this out to you. So, it warns us not to use the UWB outside, so that's the wireless USB, and, well, I'm glad I'm using it inside, because I'd get, like, struck by lightning or something. The rest is relatively standard information about the regular Wi-Fi card and all of that, but it is interesting that it does list some information about the ultra-wideband Dell Wireless 420, haha, smoke a weed card, which is the wireless USB or ultra-wideband card. So we're gonna stick this back together. Also, you'll notice the fans. It's very funny. They couldn't fit one large fan, so they just smacked two very small ones there. And another unique feature of this laptop is that it can fit two SSDs. And it only shipped with SSDs, in fact. I can't find a cable to plug in the second one because the cables are all very specific lengths and they're all routed in very specific means. So I can't obtain a cable for a second SSD, but it uses 1.8-inch micro SATA SSDs, which were pretty common at the time, and one of them is built in from the factory, obviously. This was one of the first laptops to only be available with SSDs. And then there are mounting holes for another, I think right around here on the inside of the chassis. So it's pretty interesting. And I am still using the original SSD, and it is pretty damn fast. So, and to wrap everything up, finally, let's make the laptop do something it was never supposed to. Let's launch that little shortcut bar here once the app that runs it loads fully. Now, the hardware in this is very weak. It uses a, at max, 1.6 gigahertz Core 2 Duo U9600 or SU9600 and has 4 gigabytes of soldered memory, which is a massive deficit to this laptop. At its max configuration, this cost about $5,000, which is absolutely ludicrous for low-end hardware. So that's another reason why this didn't really catch on, because it was way too damn expensive to be practical at all. So I think this is probably the worst $5,000 laptop you could ever buy when it comes to running games, since it uses built-in Intel GMA 4500M HD graphics. And they're not too capable in terms of 3D, especially at a higher resolution of 1600 by 900. However, well, let's just try this out here. The speakers also are not exceptional at all, because of course they're not. It's a business laptop. You do get stereo speakers with pretty good stereo separation because they're so far apart, but that's about all the good things I can say about them. So it runs reasonably smoothly until you actually start playing. There we go, I just had to turn my microphone around. That should sound a little better. So it runs fine unless there are particle effects or anything. And you see, it's really not that great once a lot of things start happening on screen. I am running this at the absolute max settings because that's always how I benchmark this game, so that I can get constant results that I can compare. Ooh, that got laggy. It's by no means unplayable, and, well, it just kind of goes to show that Intel's GMA graphics were pretty damn good. But it's a $5,000 laptop, and this is not $5,000 performance. Clearly, it's a business laptop. It was not meant for gaming. But even in like a $1,000 business laptop, like the Latitude E6400, you get an NVIDIA NVS graphics card that's about equivalent to a GeForce 9300. So even in mid-range business laptops, you at least got NVIDIA graphics, but this is just too slim to even fit an NVIDIA card. So it is a little bit of a shame, a little bit of a letdown. Again, these Intel graphics aren't bad, they're just not really what you would expect from a $5,000 laptop. And again, this is a fully loaded model. This is one of the highest end configurations that you could get. It has all the optional bells and whistles. It's got the wireless card, it's got the 4 gigs of RAM, it's got the CPU that's faster. The other option was 1.4 gigahertz and 2 gigabytes of RAM, which I actually ended up paying well over $100 for this laptop, plus about 30 more for the dock. So this is one of the more expensive laptops I've looked at on this channel. There were ones for cheaper, but I like to actually use my old laptops, and God knows I wasn't going to settle for 2 gigabytes of RAM. That was bad back in 2009, and it's unusable nowadays. 4 gigabytes of RAM, you can scrape by with most productivity applications, you can have a decent number of browser tabs open, but 2 gigabytes? I mean, Windows 10 eats up about 1.5 gigs on startup, like even deep loaded. So that's absolutely not enough. If you do want one of these, be aware that A, it's a goddamn pain in the ass to get all the drivers running, and you will need Windows 7 to use the wireless dock and display link and all of that stuff, and B, that it's not quite the fastest laptop out there. So I think you're kind of seeing why this didn't succeed. It's ludicrously overpriced, and it has features that, although are fascinating, most people didn't need. It's more of a proof of concept, as I've said, than something they actually meant to sell. It looks awesome, but at the same time, the wireless dock and the wireless USB, the wireless dock as in, like, the wireless charging, it's really awesome, it looks cool, and when you show people, it's an amazing party trick, but it's kind of a disappointment, and it's absolutely not practical, and because you have to have the dock literally right next to the laptop anyway, you know what you're going to do? You're going to plug your USB stick straight into the laptop. You're going to plug your DVI monitor straight into the display port using an adapter. In practicality, like in an actual use case, you will never use the dock for anything other than showing off the fact that you have a wireless dock, and that's unfortunately why this laptop didn't succeed. Because, I mean, you can pull that off in the consumer world, really, you can sell something with gimmicks and people will eat it up and think it's the coolest thing ever. But if you're trying to sell something to businesses that are going to buy hundreds, maybe thousands of these devices, well, IT managers are going to look at this and say, huh, so it's a $5,000 laptop with a less reliable dock, lower specs, and really just inconveniently large size compared to, say, a $1,000 laptop that is faster, has a more reliable dock, is better supported overall, and is going to last us longer, also is a lot more durable. Well, which one are you going to buy? Are you going to buy the gimmicky yet mediocre $5,000 one, or the reliable, solid, tried and true, like $800 to $1,000 one? You're going to buy the Latitude E6400. So anyway, that's kind of the end of my specification-related rant here. Oh, by the way, it does use DDR3 memory that runs at 1066 megahertz, so it's pretty nice. Also, there's about 500 megabytes reserved for the iGPU, which is kind of ridiculous, and you also can't change that. So your 4 gigabytes of memory does quickly turn into 3.5, so that's another reason not to go with the 2 gigabyte model. You'll only have a gig and a half of memory, which is, well, that's not good, is it? Well, that's all I have for the Windows side, but there's still more to show you. Because that Core 2 Duo isn't the only CPU in this machine. That 4 gigabytes isn't the only RAM, and that 256 gigabyte SSD isn't the only storage. There is an ARM CPU with its own RAM, its own wireless card, its own dedicated storage, and its own connection to the touchpad, keyboard, and display. And it's activated with that second power button. Now this feature is called Latitude ON EX, and it boots up an entirely separate, very limited part of the computer. And, well, it's an absolutely fascinating feature. As we turn it on, we see a logo that says Monte Vista Linux powered, and that is also mentioned in the install log. You see, I had to update this onboard module when I first got the laptop because it was locked with a password and I needed to reflash the firmware because it needed to be updated anyway. Reading through the install log was pretty fascinating. There were multiple references to Monte Vista, the creator of the Linux distro this runs, and there were also references to the actual specs of the machine, especially the 256 megabyte Hynix chip that it boots from. So let me log in. And here we are. This is not running on the Core 2 Duo. This is a completely separate computer inside the computer. And well, this is just fascinating. We're going to close out of the auto setup, and I'll give you a little tour around here. Now, first of all, on the hardware side, I can't plug anything into the USB ports. I can't use the display out. I can't use the Ethernet because none of that is even turned on right now. It's all hooked up to the Intel chipset. So it's a completely separate part of the board that is running right now, and that's the only thing powered on. It, in fact, doesn't even have proper graphics drivers, really. I don't think there's any hardware acceleration going on here. Obviously, it has to have some part of the SoC that's processing the video, but it's not scaled at the correct resolution. So, clearly, it's very limited. I'm going to connect to Wi-Fi here. No network devices available. That's a bit of a shame. Let's see if that does anything. So it runs XFCE, or at least that's the desktop manager that this Linux version uses. So here in the configuration settings of Linux, you can do basically nothing. You can configure what the computer does when you close the lid, for example. So there's nothing you can even really change here. There's not a lot that's configurable. This is all you need to do in a computer. Mouse, restart, shut down, and basically change the power settings. So I don't know why mouse is separate from the system settings. That's a bit odd. There's, change the volume down here. A lot of the unique features of this laptop actually don't work in this mode. Like, for example, you can't use the Edge Touch. You can't use the webcam. The multi-touch touchpad doesn't work because none of those are powered on. In fact, not even the backlit keyboard can be used. That's how stripped down this mode truly is. To flash the firmware, you have to do it through Windows, and it boots up the Linux distro on the CPU, the ARM CPU in here. It boots it up and, shuffles things around, and it installs new packages which have to be signed. But while it's booting it up, you can see that really the only interface present on the module is a USB 2 to PS2 bridge that's used to interface with the touchpad and the keyboard, but also the rest of the motherboard. It seems to have a direct connection with the Intel I/O chip, I believe, and I could be wrong here, but I think there is a USB lane on the inside that goes straight from the Intel chipset to this module, because the firmware is flashed straight to the NAND through a USB 2 virtual network adapter, which is really fascinating, and that's an interesting way to access the module from Windows. Again, that doesn't mean that you can use most of the functions of the laptop. That's just to flash the firmware. But unfortunately, oh, here we go. It finished scanning for network connections. This is so slow because it is in fact a phone CPU from 2008. And, well, a phone CPU from 2008 won't be a very good chip, will it? It's going to take ages to even pair to this wireless network, and look how laggy it is just trying to check the battery. Okay, so it says we have an hour 24 remaining on 35% battery, and I probably get maybe 20 minutes out of it on that battery percentage running on Windows. So that's the main advantage here. It was marketed as longer battery life and also starts quicker than Windows, but it actually doesn't. Both Windows 7 and even Windows 10 boot up a few seconds faster than this module, and they're also a lot more pleasant to use. And of course, you can do more than just check email, check your calendar, and look at your address book. And all of those are synced through a server, and they're not just like web apps. They don't just open a website. They are actually applications. However, the only one that really works is Firefox. It's the only one that really works correctly. And, well, this is a very old version of Firefox. By the way, there isn't really desktop window management. It's just one window, similarly to what you would see on a phone. Like, you can't switch between windows. You open one application, and that's it. So, let's look up... Actually, no, let's just go to a very light site. Alright, so I just checked it out, and this uses a Texas Instruments OMAP 3430, which is an ARM Cortex-A8 processor, and it's clocked, of course, one core at up to 600 megahertz. So we're really playing with power here. We've got a crazy fast CPU. Now, a little while back, I think I got it to load. I'll just try and load Google. And if that doesn't work, I'll try and load FrogFind. The Firefox version, of course, is very old, and there's no way to update it now because, well, the packages that are installed have to be signed. So even though it seems easy to jailbreak because it installs through Windows, the installer will refuse to install any modified unsigned packages, which is a real shame because, well, this is kind of useless. Now, because you can't plug in any USB devices, you can't even save files to a USB drive. There's no file manager. You can't look at what's on your either 256 megs of NAND or your SATA hard drive. All you can do is use the web browser and the email contacts, all of that stuff. So there's not even a calculator or a word processor or any of that. And it is taking absolute ages, even though we have almost full bars on our wireless network. So you're kind of seeing the misery of this. Quick interjection, I'm editing this right now. A couple months prior to filming this video, I got it to load the LTT forum. It took around 5 minutes, and the page was pretty broken because of the old Firefox version. Thought I'd just add that. Yeah, this thing is really slow. It sucks. It's horrible. Because again, it's a phone CPU. TI's datasheet that I'm looking at on my monitor right now actually shows a Motorola phone as the prime application for their TI OMAP. Oh, here it is. Here's Google. So you saw how long that took to load Google.com. Oof. Let's just look up the CPU. Texas Instruments OMAP 3430. It's currently 11:51 a.m. according to this clock, and I will sit here until it loads. It's been a minute. Well, it took four minutes for it to come up with that error message. It's now 11:55 according to the clock, and, well, it couldn't connect. I believe a little while ago I got FrogFind to work. Now this is a search engine built for old computers, so hopefully the little Texas Instruments OMAP in here will be able to run it. But I think I'm doing a pretty good job at demonstrating how horrible this is. However, our battery, when we started, was at 35%, and we've only dropped down to 31. So this is a very power-efficient CPU, and at this point, it's... oh, nice. Well, there goes our network. Just dropped out there for a second. But it's a very power-efficient CPU, so obviously it's going to make it pretty far off of this battery, and it took it a while to load, but here we go. So this is a very stripped down search engine. I think I said web browser earlier, that's not correct, but this is a very stripped down search engine built for old computers, and as you see, it loaded pretty well, and yeah, here we go. Dan makes games? Who's this goof? He stole my thing. It was finally able, through FrogFind, to load my channel, or at least load the search for my channel. I believe FrogFind uses the DuckDuckGo engine and then removes basically everything except for just plain text. But here, clicking on the result in FrogFind just kind of brings us to this blank page, unfortunately. There's one more that I'm going to try. I'm going to try a forum. I got this to load a few months ago. It barely worked, and it took several minutes, but I think I can get it to work again, and you know, I'll just wait a little bit. It's not very comfortable, so let me talk at you a little more. So I would venture to call this unusable, unfortunately. The Core 2 Duo is great. It's fine. It's nice. It's still completely usable for web browsing. The rest of the computer is awesome. But this Latitude On mode makes no sense. Because, yes, it does deliver on the battery life claim. However, it boots slower than Windows, and it's absolutely dog slow to use. And yes, the internet is different now than it was in 2009-ish when this was new. However, if you owned a mobile phone around 2008, 2009, you would know that that was not a pleasant web browsing experience. And this is also not a pleasant web browsing experience. And I would say web browsing, oh, here we go. Web browsing isn't all that matters, except for the fact that that's really the only thing you can do here. So it did load Linus Tech Tips. It took a few minutes, and the CPU is so fast that the cursor is lagging on screen. Let's see who's online. So clearly, this older version of, well, as I was saying, this older version of Firefox isn't capable of loading a lot of things because most of its certificates have expired. So I believe if I try to like sign into the website, it won't work because, well, again, the certificates have expired, and yeah, nice and slow. It's not even loading the profiles, it's just saying everyone is a guest. You also can't open multiple tabs. You just have one tab, same as you just have one window. So there's no such thing as background processes because, again, this is basically a mobile phone stretched out to 16 inches. So it's certainly a fascinating thing to take a look at, but in practice it's almost completely useless. So you can either turn it off by pressing the power button, or you can suspend the Linux module and basically place just the module into sleep mode with pressing the Latitude On power button again. So if you configure a specific setting in the BIOS, you can keep that CPU always running while you're using the fully featured rest of the computer. And that's an interesting concept, which it doesn't really serve any purpose other than letting the Latitude On module boot up more quickly. However, it's certainly an interesting thing that it does offer. And that's really what this laptop is. A lot of weird, interesting, yet completely impractical technologies shoved together into one weird, fascinating, overpriced box. It doesn't quite deliver on performance, and its docking accessory doesn't quite either. And it's packed with gimmicks, very high priced, and doesn't quite deliver on the premise of performance. But the hardware inside is so bafflingly innovative, incorporating features that we wouldn't see in laptops for many more years, and in some cases we don't even have standard nowadays. So it's absolutely a fascinating machine, and I'm very glad that I have one. I can be part of the club of like 8 people that actually own one of these. So before we wrap up, I'd like to thank everyone who's supported me, whether that be financially or just watching my videos and enjoying them. I really appreciate it, and especially with the financial support from your subscriptions or donations, I've been able to take on bigger projects like this, which did cost a non-negligible amount of dollaroonies. So thank you everyone who watches, thank you everyone who supports me. You are greatly appreciated. So thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you'll come back for another episode.